I'd like to call to order the Macedonia Planning Commission meeting for November 18th, 2019. Can we get a roll call?
Sure. Mr. Westbrook?
Here.
Mr. Chivon?
Here.
Mr. Cox?
Here.
Mr. Bellata?
Here.
Mr. Finley?
Here.
All right, first item is approval of the October 21st public hearing minutes. Anybody have any comments on those? Anyone like to make a motion?
I'll move that we approve them as submitted.
A second. Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Next is the minutes from the regular meeting from October 21st, 2019. Any comments on those? Anyone want to make a motion?
I move we approve those as submitted.
I second.
Anything else? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. We have, two items have been withdrawn. The Petros Homes has been withdrawn, and the signage for area temps has been withdrawn. So we are up to our only applicant tonight, and that is Swenson's. Is that you?
Yes.
All right, why don't you come on up?
Sure.
Have a seat here. So you can use the chair to put your boards
Okay.
in, and
That's great.
the other one.
Let's do that.
Could you get your name for the record?
Yeah, my name is Ronald D. It's D as in David, E.E. I'm the Vice President of Real Estate for Swenson's. We're located in Akron, Ohio. And it's in East County of Palm Avenue. We just celebrated our 85th anniversary. We've been in business for 85 years. In 85 years, there have been 3 individual owners of the company. We opened our 14th restaurant today in New Albany, Ohio, outside of Columbus. So in 85 years, we've opened 14 restaurants. We've been very careful and diligent about our growth. We're not interested in becoming, McDonald's or Burger King or anything like that. We're a local Ohio-based company. One of the things that's very interesting that not many people know is we grind and blend our own beef every single day. We have a commissary right next to our corporate office in Akron. It opens at 2 o'clock in the morning, and we start grinding and blending beef. And about 6:30 in the morning, we have refrigerated trucks that drive the beef and hamburgers out to every one of the restaurants, including Columbus today. So it's a very unique concept in terms of that.
Why don't you give us an overview of what you're proposing, and
Sure.
we'll get some comments.
Very excited to, we are under lease, contingent upon obviously obtaining site plan approval and building permits to lease this property. The property is currently owned by a gentleman named Jim Bella. Mr. Bella lives in Orlando, Florida. He had been leasing the property to Steak and Shake. Steak and Shake closed. There were actually 3 years left on the lease. I contacted Steak and Shake and said, would you mind if we contacted Mr. Bella about leasing the property? They said, no problem. We leased it. Mr. Bella and Steak and Shake negotiated a lease termination agreement. And so we now have an agreement, again, that's contingent upon obtaining all necessary approvals from Macedonia. We're proposing to build a 1,711 square foot building. It is all kitchen. There is no public area in the building except for 2 restrooms. There's an ADA accessible men's and women's room at the back of the building. It enters from here and here. And that's why the handicap parking spaces are on the back of the building, because they're closest to the restrooms. The 2 doors on the front of the building are where our curb servers run in and out of the building to take your order and to place your order. One thing that I'm not sure everybody's aware of is our curb servers that work for Swenson's throughout the company, all 14 restaurants, you are required to be a full-time college student. You have to be taking a minimum of 12 credit hours in college. During your college career, you can take 1 semester off if you want, primarily for financial reasons, take from school. But if you graduate from college, you lose your job. We only want well-dressed, articulate, intelligent people, guys and girls working on the property. We want that to be who greets you at your car. And that's been our tradition for 85 years. It's a very competitive job because, as you know, in the fast food business, you don't typically make tips. Our curb servers make tips. They get tips from the customers because they're working so hard, they're running. Their mantra is sprint and smile. They are required to run to your car and run back. So they run into this curb room and they scream out your order, they prepare your order, and then they run back to your car and deliver your order to you. There was some question about the trays. If you allow us, we do put the tray in the window of your car, old school fashion, old fashioned, or you can take the tray inside of your car and have it inside of your car. Hamburgers, cheeseburgers, chicken sandwiches, sloppy joe, grilled cheese, chili, egg salad sandwiches, french fries, onion rings, zucchini. That's, our menu. 18 flavors of milkshakes. A lot of people mix and match our milkshakes. They mix and match the 18 flavors. We have 3 very popular drinks called the California, the Ohio, and the Florida. And that's ginger ale mixed with grape syrup, orange syrup, and cherry syrup. So that's where you get the state nomenclatures from. We have one very famous unpaid spokesperson. We call him the Swinatic. There's a gentleman from Akron named LeBron James that can't stop talking about us. He talks about us constantly. Twitter, Instagram. When he won the championship in Miami, the first thing he did was get on Instagram and said, "I'm going home to go to Swenson's to get a Galley Boy hamburger." The Galley Boy hamburger makes up 15% of all of our business. And it was named the best cheeseburger in the United States by Forbes magazine. So it's very popular and draws a lot of people in. We are 100% drive-in restaurant. We do not have any patio. We don't have any interior dining seats whatsoever. The only people inside the building are kitchen employees that are preparing food and the curb servers. Again, the 2 public restrooms are at the back of the building. You pull into the parking lot. In these exterior parking spaces, which we call the outfield, you back your car into the space. You reverse it in, and you turn on your headlights. When your headlights turn on, a curb server runs to your car, takes your order, puts the order back into the building, and then one of the other curb servers will come and deliver your order. It's team service. So if there are 5 or 6 curb servers walking on the parking lot, when they see lights come on, they run. When there's an order inside running, they run. So you're not going to have the same curb server all the time. They pool their tips at the end of the night. So at the end of the night, all the tips they make, they pull them together, which is great because the curb server performance becomes self-policing. If you're not running as fast as the 3 of us, we're going to let you know about it because you're affecting our income in our pocket. So it's kind of a self-policing, job, which is really interesting. We also have the curb servers rotate amongst all the restaurants. You won't have the same curb servers working here all the time. We have them rotate amongst all the restaurants, so they're constantly, seeing new people and new customers. We are proposing to have 85 parking spaces here. That's a little bit more than a typical fast food restaurant, and the reason for that is every parking space is a table and chairs for us. We like to say that when you come to Swenson's, you dine in the most expensive chair you probably own, and it's in your car. You can control your own temperature, you control your own music. The curb server, one of their jobs is kind of policing behavior on the property. So if you come in and your windows are open and you're playing your Frank Sinatra too loud, they're going to ask you to turn it down because the kid next to you that's listening to rap music doesn't want to listen to your Frank Sinatra. So it's kind of self-policing on the property. When they're not doing that and serving food, they're picking up trash. They're required to walk around and pick up trash all the time. They also manage, the traffic on the lot and tell people where to park, how to park, that type of thing, if you're not familiar with the business. As you can see, it's pretty much all parking. There are cars, constantly pulling in, pulling out. The curb servers are running back and forth to the building, and that's pretty much the operation. There is existing cross-access into the former pizza property, and there's cross-access into the tire discount store to the west and to the east, and then we're proposing 2 curb cuts in the front of the property. The curb cuts that are in the existing Steak and Shake building are rather awkward. They're not easy to get in and out to. They're kind of narrow and they're not straight in and out, except for the full service traffic light, which is right here that connects to Macedonia Commons, which is one of the reasons we love this site. It does have that full traffic signal to control traffic in and out of the property.
Is your plan to have, sorry to interrupt,
No
is
problem.
your plan to have one being in, one being out? Is that, or how are you?
This really can't be in and out because there's a full service traffic light here. So this is going to be a full service signal. This can be right in, right out if you want it to be.
Okay, so you are still planning to have in and out there at the
Yes.
Western Drive?
Yeah.
Any concern that that's a little bit skinny for, are you only going to have
We don't think so.
1 lane exit? You're not going to have like 2, I'm trying to,
Yeah.
no, I was concerned, if the one needs, if you're planning just an in and out, I would say, I don't think that would work.
Yeah.
think right now they've got 2 lanes exiting
Yeah.
at that drive.
We could do it that way. These, you know, what we could do is the easternmost entrance,
Where's the
would
road
be
he's
2 lanes
talking
in,
about?
and this could be really gravel with traffic light, if you'd like to do that
Well-
and add a traffic light.
Well, I was thinking about widening that one. So
Okay.
I think you've got to have
Traffic
it in
light.
at the signal too, because
Sure, people coming
you
across the
can't
street.
take a left
Oh.
into the second driveway because there's nowhere to stack up. There's a turn lane that gets blocked.
I think when the lights green, we're gonna get a lot of traffic from Macedonia Commons coming straight across
Mhm.
the road into the property. So that's probably a good idea.
I was wondering if that needs to be like a 3-lane driveway.
We can do that, yeah. It's currently only 22 feet wide, so we should probably make that 30
Yeah,
feet wide.
something like that.
It's already
Yeah,
here?
Skinny at the end, because you're really coming out of
Is it right here, like in the middle of the road? I don't
Yeah.
know.
Okay, good. I'm sorry. Go ahead,
That's all right.
continue.
Definitely, you know, all of our landscaping will be up front on the street, so we'll landscape this area as much as possible. We'll landscape these 2 islands. And then, obviously, in the back, we have landscaping in the buffer, the residential property to the rear. And then we can landscape these 2 fingers in here. So around the building, it's pretty much just striped asphalt and parking, because the curb servers are running back and forth so fast all the time. We don't like to have curbs in the way because they trip over the curbs and fall down. So the fewer impediments we can have for the curb servers to deliver service to and from the building, the better.
The building that's there now, are you gonna utilize that building or
No.
is it? you have
The
to take it
building's
out?
significantly larger. That's one thing we should notice. The current Steak and Shake building is about 6,000 square feet.
Uh-huh.
Our proposed building is only 1,711 square feet. The building is significantly smaller than what's on the property now. We do not have a drive-through window. That's very important. We don't have the queuing of the drive-through lane or drive-through window. We don't tend to do that. It's not part of who we are. It's not our
Mhm.
culture. We have met with the architectural consultant that Macedonia uses. She's reviewed our building. We met with city staff and the mayor to review her recommendations. And what we proposed here is a red brick building. The red brick will be selected to match the other red brick in the area. I don't have a sample with me tonight, but we're gonna match what's already in the area. We've extended the roof, and we put a hip roof on with dark black shingles on it to match the other roofs that are on the street in the area. And we've added this, well, this is very interesting. Under other restaurants, if you drive around town like University Heights, North Homestead, Avon, this is a double red band. But because of the architectural nature of the area, most of the buildings have kind of a white band before you get to the top roof line. So your architectural consultant and the mayor and the staff recommended that we add a white band in here, which is essentially a beam that's sitting on top of these columns. These are blue columns, white band, blue metal panels, all glass. At nighttime, this is very interesting because you can see all the way into the restaurant. You can see all the activity of what's taking place in the restaurant. This is all white on the inside, and at nighttime, the glass becomes transparent. You can see all the activity and the action inside the restaurant, which we really like. Sign on the front, facing out towards the street. Sign on the side here. This would be facing east. And then we also think we have the other side of the road. And a side facing west as well. This is our menu board. Obviously, we don't have an opportunity to present a menu to you at a table inside the restaurant. We have a menu that is on the building, and all of our items are on that panel right there. And then these are metal frames that have limited time offers in them. So like today, it's advertising the pumpkin milkshake is in the limited time offer area. And I think one of them right now is offering gift certificates. So we change those out monthly. This is a residential hardy plank siding up here. If you guys are familiar with hardy plank, which is a cementitious residential siding, it lasts very long. It comes in different colors. It's not required to be painted. It's literally a cementitious product. It does have a wood grain on it, so it'll look like wood. Metal coping, same color. And the big changes that we made to the building here obviously were the brick, which we had not done, the white beam, and the hip roof on the tower. These are the restaurant entrances on the back of the building here. This is the main kitchen door entrance from the back of the building. And then these are the curb server doors where the curb servers come in and out of the kitchen.
All right, we've got some comments from the planner. Let me see if there's anybody else that has anything. Chris, would you like to go over your comments?
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chairman. My report dated November 10th, 2019 is what I'll refer to for the commission. As the applicant stated, they're proposing a new building, raising the existing Steak and Shake, putting up a 1,711 square foot building on approximately 1.2 acres. The site is zoned B1 Convenience Business District, which requires about 20,000 square feet for the lot size, this being about 1.2 acres more than complies with the general regulations. I've broken down my report into the sort of the items that I speak to with respect to the site plan, and then did signage as a separate review item. So first and foremost, the drive-in, as it's referred to, the code in the B1 district speaks to under the permitted uses, restaurants, ice cream parlors, soda fountains, taverns, but excluding drive-ins. And so on its face, it seems like that's not allowed, that this would require a variance. But as you dive into the code, you really start to understand that what the code is referring to is a drive-through window, as the applicant stated, with queuing lanes. And that's not what's happening here. This is a drive-in the historic sense of pulling in, being served at your car, where there's no drive-through window. To support that, if you were to look under the supplementary regulations of the code under 117108, it also refers to drive-in establishments, and under 117108B, it speaks to car stacking for drive-in windows. So I think the code is just written from a time which sort of confuses the difference between the two, but I clearly think it's referring to drive-through windows. A recent example would be the Starbucks, where that had a drive-through window, equally zoned B1 convenience business, and that particular user had to get a variance for that drive-through window, again, being very different than a drive-in restaurant where there's no queuing lanes to pick up food on the go and staying in your car and driving in and driving right out of the site. So I don't believe that, that regardless of what that says in the code, I don't think that's what the intent is, and I think that's supported within the code that this is a permitted use by right in the B1 district. So with that said, the next item that I refer to or discuss is the parking. The site has 58 existing parking spaces. The applicant is proposing to add 26 new for a total of 84 parking spaces. I do think the site is overparked. Our code is very generous in terms of parking requirements. We require one space for every 50 square feet of restaurant space, which is, quite frankly, it's kind of an old style of code. Some number of codes have gotten away from that. It's one that's very generous to parking, and then again, about an additional 26 spaces are being added. We don't have minimum and maximum, so it's allowable to have those additional spaces. However, a fair amount of new parking that's being created are the spaces around the frontage of the building, and I'll break them up into north, south, east, west. There are 9 by 18 parking spaces. The code requires 10 by 20. The north-south spaces, where you see the barrier-free or handicap spacing to the north of the site and south of the building facing 82, those can be, I think, those can be reconfigured to meet the 10 by 20 with no significant issue. You may lose a few spaces, but again, I think you're well over parked on the site as it is. You'd make up the length issue, the 18 verse 20, by reducing the drive aisles down to 22 feet.
Sure.
And the code allows that, so you'd be okay. Where you're gonna have hit a snafu is your east-west. Your east-west parking spaces, because your drive aisles are at the minimum 22 feet.
Right.
And those are 18-foot long spaces. So To do that, you'd have to get a variance or somehow solve that 2-foot deficiency per
I'm gonna ask him.
per parking stall. So, you know, an option could be just eliminating a row of parking, slightly moving the building, and you wouldn't have parking on one side of the facade. Or you'd have to seek a variance from the board if you were so inclined to want to keep those. But the code does, you know, specifically state 10 by 20.
Okay.
And it's not good to mix parking sizes, stick with one and go with it.
So what we have typically done in other communities, and most of our new development the last couple of years has been in the Columbus area. It's very normal now for a typical parking space to be 9 by 18. That's kind of standard size. We've been making the outfield spaces 10 by 20 because everybody backs into these spaces. And it's a lot easier to back into a 10 by 20 space than it is a 9 by 18. The reason we've been, other than the dimensional problem with this site, the reason we have these spaces as 9 by 18 is it's a lot easier to pull in head on. And these are the most popular spaces on the site because these are right up against the building. People want to be as close to the building as possible. So people pull in head on into all of these spaces and then back into these spaces. So we wouldn't want to give up these spaces because they are our most popular spaces. We wouldn't want to eliminate, you know, one of these rows. So if it's, I think we can go ahead and make these 10 by 20. I think that'll work very easily, the front and the back of the building. The sides, I think what we would prefer to do is actually come and ask for a variance because they are very popular spaces and we don't have the width on the property to reduce the 22-foot drive aisles anymore. But I would say in other communities, we have actually, the standard size of the parking space is 9 by 18, and we inform everybody that we're making the outfield spaces larger to accommodate the backing into the parking space.
You would lose one if you, yeah, you'd lose a spot there too if you increase the width.
The other thing to point out here is there are structural columns. The reason for these two islands here are there are structural steel columns that are holding up the roof in these two striped islands in the parking lot here, so it becomes a little bit difficult to adjust the parking spaces, but we'll take a look at it. Good.
So you would prefer to go to the Board of Zoning Appeals?
Yeah.
Okay.
We'd rather not lose a row of parking against the building, which is our most popular parking.
So then the next thing goes on. I talk about my memo item number 4, or item number 3 is the brick color. You had indicated red. Your notes and your elevation show polar white, I think is what
Yeah,
it says.
that's incorrect. That's a mistake. It will be red brick.
That's fine. So I noted it was most likely just a clerical error, but should just be corrected on your final plan submittal.
Yep.
And then with regard to landscaping, section 117202-6 does require a mixture of deciduous and coniferous trees, so evergreens and non-evergreens, and so no coniferous trees are being proposed. So I just recommended that the next final site plan be amended to include some of those Norway spruce or concolor fir. The city arborist, I think, has been using concolor firs. You know, it's private property. If you want to use Norway, that's fine. Either are nice, but a mixture of some of those. And I felt that you should add some to the front tree lawn area facing 82, to add some of those, both the evergreens and ornamentals out on 82 side.
Okay.
I don't know if you're proposing any new lighting. I mean, you're going to have lighting on the new building and wall packs. I didn't know if there's going to be any additional
All of the
poles.
lighting will be brand new. We want to use a shielded LED light. We'll make sure that the lights are appropriate to maintain, you know, a well-lit parking lot, but not exceed the property line with more than 1 foot candle of light. And we do prefer, you know, an LED light fixture. I don't believe the current Steak and Shake light fixtures are LED, and if they are, they're a much older version. So we'd like to replace all of the site lighting with brand new LED site lighting that we would purchase.
So I think your north property line, I think, is residential.
Yes, it is.
And so, you wouldn't be able to exceed a 1/2 foot candle there.
Okay.
And one at the other property lines. And you should use shielded downward cast lighting, so it's 100% horizontal cutoff on your lighting.
That's fine, you can do that.
And then you just provide on your final submittal, a photometric plan that shows the grid that illustrates compliance.
Okay.
And then just a miscellaneous comment, the site plan, when you do your final site plan, should reflect sort of a compliance table that just indicates what the standards are and how you're meeting those standards. Just good to have on the site plan, so a future reader picks it up, they know.
Okay, very good.
And then signage would be the next thing that I have in my report. So the proposal includes about 351.63 approximately square feet of signage. So the signage for under the code is based on your frontage on the main road. So you have a small amount, obviously 23.73 feet. So the way you oriented the building in a north-south manner, you have a small amount facing 82. I elected to use the longer part of the building, the 72.5 almost feet. That gives you more signage, identification signage.
Sure.
And under the code, I think we can do that because you have a customer entrance facing a parking lot. So I think that's justified to use that, and that gives you about almost 145 square feet of signage. Again, you're proposing about a little over 350 square feet, so you're a little over 205, 206 square feet over on what's allowed. And then you also have too many signs per elevation. So I broke those down. On the north elevation, there are no signs. They're just instructional signs that the planning commission can approve. When I say no signs, they're not commercial speech signs.
Right.
They're signs identifying the customer or the users on the lot in some way in an instructional manner. The commission can approve those so long as they're not larger than necessary to serve their intended purpose. I don't think they are, so that's a motion of the commission if they agree. The south elevation, there's 3 signs proposed. A cabinet sign, the galley boy, I believe, lettering sign, and then a small sign that indicates the establishment date of the company, I believe.
Yep.
And then on the east and west elevations, on both, there's 4 signs. The cabinet sign, 2 what I call blade signs. Those are the signs that hang off the back. And yeah, so that's like a traditional blade sign like you'd see in a downtown setting. And then there's 2 menu board signs. The menu boards contain a small sign graphic for Swenson. So that's how we come up with the total number of signage, or total number of signs, and then the total area of those signs. So the commission would have to take action on the instructional signs. And then with regard to the total area of signage, you would have to seek a variance from the Board of Zoning Appeals for that amount. So my recommendation, I felt the site plan was well thought out and comprehensive. I believe the commission should consider preliminary plan approval and then subject to a number of things. Obtaining the variance for the 9x18 if that's the route you wanted to go, the parking spaces in front of the east-west building elevation, and then obtaining a variance for the total area of signage being requested, as well as the total number of signs per elevation. The code limits you to 1 sign per elevation. So you'd need some variances there, and then provide an updated site plan reflecting compliance with the lighting, landscaping, and other performance notes that I had in my report. And I can answer any questions the commission may have.
All right. Mr. Mo?
Just when we get to that point, we'll have to review the construction documents for all the fire code and building code requirements.
Good.
Well, I think we spent a few hours together, so we got everything ironed out pretty much. Thank you.
All right, what questions?
I have one. I want to ask Brian one. Brian, all this is kind of moot since you're going to need a variance on it, but you said in the north and south, maybe if the access road was reduced from 24 feet down to 22, that would add another 2 inches to the length of the,
2 feet.
2 feet, I mean, 2 feet. But how would that, they'd still be out of balance because the width wouldn't be changed at all, would it? It'd still be 9?
Correct, they'd have to lose probably a parking space on both of those
Oh, okay.
rows.
I didn't follow you. They're gonna get a variance anyway, so I guess it doesn't matter. I was just curious about that, okay. That's the only question I had.
And to that question, I don't know, maybe the applicant can shed some light on it. It sounds like you were willing to reconfigure the drive aisles to get the length. Were you looking to also lose a space on both the north and south to get the width, or were you gonna seek a variance for?
I think what we prefer to do is, we will increase the size of the spaces on the front and the back of the building, which is the north and south, right, to 10 by 20s. We'll do that. But I prefer to leave these parking spaces as 9 by 18, and the reason for that is because of the structure of the building and the steel columns that are holding up the canopy, the spacing of the parking spaces is really contingent upon the location of those steel columns. And as I said, we really, in every community, we find that a 9 by 18 space is more than adequate in order to service the cars of today.
Were you planning on, as he asked, are you planning on losing a space on the exact front and back of the building, losing a space so you could conform to the width? So the width, you planning on losing
I'll
spaces?
just reduce the island spacing here, reduce the island.
What?
Four islands. This island and this island would be reduced.
Oh, the island would be, I get you, okay, I get you.
Pick up the width.
Yeah, I see, okay, yeah, that makes sense.
What else do you guys? So I've got some thought. I'm concerned with the architecture style of the building in the Western Reserve. It just doesn't really seem to comply with the style of everything else up and down through there and the town center requirements. There's a lot of elements that are noted in the code that, you know, you don't have to use all these, but you should try and use some of them, and it appears you're using almost none of them. You know, this doesn't, to me, does not blend with the area at all. You know, a variety of things, you know, large expanses of metal sheeting, painted metal sheeting. You know, that's not Western Reserve. The dark blue doesn't really go. The window frames, you've got it's anodized aluminum. You know, everything else, if you look up and down, is white framed windows. That's kind of part of the style. Let me see what else I can. Yeah, the siding is probably okay. Gray, you'd probably be about the only one out there with any gray on the building, but I don't know that that's necessarily a bad thing. Brick is, you know, very prominent in all of our buildings, and you look at the front of the building, and you've got two very thin little strips of brick. That's the only element of brick that's on the entire front of the building. You know, the colors that you use, the columns. One of the, you know, the specific things the code mentions is, you know, that could be used as, you know, prominent columns, not six-inch metal posts that are painted blue. You know, those should be built up white decorative columns, much like you see at this, you know, various, you know, Starbucks has them. What's the O'Reilly Auto Parts has them. Many places up and down through there. And there's other elements that the code suggests: decorative lintels over the windows and doors, decorative cornices, pilasters, cupolas, prominent main entrances with frames, decorative coins, prominent columns. None of those elements are in there at all. Yeah, the code also mentions things that are definitely not allowed. You know, it's talking about the roof, and it says free-form or geometric shapes in the roof. Definitely this angled roof on the building going directly on it. That just doesn't go with the style at all. Yeah, it's just, to me, it does not conform with the town center, and that's where it's located. Sure. you know, just in all these different elements, you know, I'm looking at different, like the O'Reilly's has got the brick front, it's got the white columns, decorative white columns, it's got the pilasters, it's got the white window frames, it's got cornices, it's got prominent doors. Starbucks has got the windows, the brick front, the white windows, the columns. Even Speedway down the road, you know, they wanted to come in with just poles to hold up their awning, you know, and we said, no, they've got bricked columns for this. So, I don't know how anybody else feels about it, but I really think that the architecture is, really needs a lot of work to comply with the code. So,
We spent many hours talking to the architectural consultant that the city uses. She has endorsed this plan.
really,
She's worked with us, she made these recommendations, she recommended this roof, she recommended the brick. As you know, there were many buildings on the street that do not meet many of the requirements. Taco Bell probably being the largest violator, doesn't have many of the elements that you mentioned.
it's got several of them.
So,
It's got several of the elements. It's got brick, you know, in the front. It's got the pilasters. I believe it's got more roof characteristics than just the angled roof. So
Yeah.
it goes way beyond what this is.
Yep, I think one of the comments that came from the architectural consultant, she understands that we are trying to build a brand around a 1950s retro style drive-in restaurant. And that is not Western Reserve architecture. So she said, you know, can we come to some kind of compromise here? And she said, obviously the brick is number one. This white band here is very common throughout the street with many of the buildings. Before you get to the roof line, there's a white band. And then obviously the hip roof is a requirement. I will tell you one thing she did recommend to us is she wanted us to look at the very tall roof with the cupola on Walgreens. She said, Ron, I'm trying to help you because if you did what's on the Walgreens roof, you would be visible all the way to I-271. And I said, that's great, but that structure would cost more than an entire building. So we can come to an agreement on that. But I will tell you that she has endorsed this plan.
That's so hard to believe. I mean, I'm sure she did, but I'm really shocked that she did because this is so lacking any Western Reserve style at all. You know, a white band around it, I mean, it's a piece of sheet metal that you've got running around it. That's not what the other buildings have. They have a white band
Stucco.
around the top. Yeah, it's
A lot of
stucco
stucco.
or something similar to that with the cornice around it to give it some kind of architectural look. Nobody's got this angled roof that, you know, is not even close to a Western Reserve style blue metal poles holding up the awning. Just, that is not the Western Reserve style.
Understood?
Well, let me ask Kevin, if we looked at all your other places, how many you have, 18 or how many?
14.
If we looked on the internet, would we find, would every one of them look exactly like this or not?
No.
In some communities, they get a little tougher with you, is that what, a little?
So far, since we've started between 1934 and 2001, there were 7 restaurants built.
Right.
Between 1934 and 2001, there was like one restaurant every 15 or 20 years. Every one of those restaurants were different. They're a wide variety of architecture. Since we started growing again in 2016, all of the buildings, the previous 6 that we've done have been identical except for this one. University Heights, North Olmsted, Avon, Dublin, Ohio, New Albany, and Polaris are all identical architecture, which is our prototype building, which doesn't look anything like this.
Well, are there some of them looking a little more Western Reserve than this one?
No, they all look very 19.
How about around the finer suburbs of Columbus, and none of that?
No, we just opened in New Albany. Today with a very modern 1950s retro diner piece of
It looks like this.
Yeah, it looks like this without the roof.
Uh-huh.
I thought after we had met with the architectural consultant several times, and the mayor and some staff members, I mistakenly understood that they had endorsed and approved this.
And they may have,
So-
they may have. We saw it the first time.
Understood.
As this packet. And to me, it doesn't work. I mean, all those other communities, I doubt you were in a zoning area that requires the Western Reserve architecture.
Yeah.
That's why you're able to drop in the corporate prototype.
Yeah.
This is a code that's been in place for 25, 30 years. You know, various businesses have come in. I mean, the Steak and Shake, for one, they did not want to put that. They wanted their white and black metal building.
Yeah.
And so we simply can't. That is, it goes against the code. And in my opinion, so does this. I personally can't approve, and I'm just one of the group here. You can't approve this with the architecture as it is.
Okay, understood. I wish we, I guess I misunderstood the communication that we had with the city's architectural consultant and the mayor's office, and the staff was at that meeting. I thought that was the architectural endorsement. I did not understand that there was another level of architectural endorsement at the planning board level. So I think if we had to go further than this, on the architecture, I think we would withdraw the application.
I mean, the rest, I'm only the single one here. I mean, these guys might feel different. It's gonna stick out, which is probably something that you want, but it's not necessarily something that we want.
Yeah.
You know, there was a former planning commission member who usually had a speech. It was, he would go on for 10 minutes, and I'll do the 30-second version of it. But we try to have this style that is good for everybody. It's good for, you know, maintaining some standards, and it's good for, now your building is a little unique because of the function that's going on there, but he would always throw out the Arby's that's down the road.
Yeah.
That was a Boston Market. You know, Boston Market didn't want to put that, you know, they wanted a distinctive building that they put everywhere else, and to get them to comply with code, that's the building they had to put in.
Yeah.
They closed up shop. Arby's moved in, changed the sign, changed the awnings to something a little bit different, and they're doing well. You know, they wanted to change it, and said, no, you got to keep this character.
Yeah.
It allows, now your building, I don't know that anybody else besides the drive-in could really function in here, but it's the idea of the style and consistency up and down the road. And there are some oddballs that have maybe been there for a long time, but even some of the older buildings that have been rehabbed have managed to get in compliance. The Lincoln Lizard down the road has been expanded and modified half a dozen times, and it went from a very different looking restaurant 40 years ago to becoming what it is now. It's we try to keep, you know, addressing the architecture of it as they make modifications. I don't know. Do you guys have any other thoughts on this?
You know, I hadn't heard this before, but I kind of agree with you on that. That would be my thought on that. I'm familiar with Hudson being on the planning commission, if you know where the town of Hudson is.
I live in Hudson.
You do?
Yeah.
Well, you know their McDonald's on 303.
Yeah.
That's entirely different from any other McDonald's, and the reason was when we were on the planning commission there, they weren't going to allow that. They had their standard McDonald's, which is you know, cheaper than the one they have in there, and that thing is a Western Reserve McDonald's, and that's what happened in Hudson, and we're kind of trying to bring it up to the Western Reserve style here, and I know it's much more, it'd probably be more expensive to do some other kind of building, but it's, if you could, that's why I sort of agree with him. And we talked to the old mayor. He was sort of our architectural board, and he was very strong on that. He said, we're trying to bring this community up.
Yeah, I think our CEO's perspective is if I asked you to close your eyes and think about McDonald's in the 1950s and 60s, you see that building in your mind. There's an iconic building, and that's where we are now. We're trying to build a brand through an iconic building.
50s.
And unfortunately, because of that, we don't want.
Right.
You know, by the time McDonald's built that Hudson McDonald's, they had 20,000 McDonald's. You know, we have 14. So, you know, we're trying to build a brand with some architecture.
I don't
I understand where you're
think it would be wholesale changes. I mean, you know, the glass windows across the front, you know, that's not necessarily typical, but we found a way. What's the tire place next door that you know, they've got a big section of windows too, and some other things were done, so, you know, it works. You know, and I just think there could be some small elements that could be addressed with this that would just still maintain, you know, character, but to try and get in some kind of compliance. I mean, I don't know necessarily what it is, but it just seems like some detailed elements, some things could be done to improve on this. I mean, I think, you know, just large areas of black sheet metal is just not good. The color, the angled roof, all those things that they're, you know, I wouldn't expect you to I'm not sure exactly why, but it seems to me like it needs to have some more effort to try and get in compliance, or it's gonna be the next guy who wants to come in.
Yeah.
Is gonna be pushing the limits as well. Now we've got, you know, and then obviously your neighbor, the Pizza Hut is out of business. Someone's probably gonna demolish that. That thing's not gonna stay. And, you know, they say, well, geez, this guy didn't have to do that. He's more closer to his corporate thing than what everybody else is.
Yeah.
And whether that's, you know, good or bad for business to force these things, it's the code that we're dealt with.
I think one of the challenges that you have as a board is that the standards have been held differently for every business on the street. I use the Taco Bell as the most extreme example, and I think many of the businesses have been held to different levels of the Western Reserve architecture standard.
And yeah, I wouldn't expect, I mean, you look at like O'Reilly, okay, so and that's pretty decked out. They've got pretty much every element that you could want in that. And that was actually, I think, a scrapbook store. It wasn't O'Reilly, they didn't do it, somebody else did. It doesn't have to be that, but is there some things you can do without adding tons of cost to the thing to try and get it? I mean, personally, I could see us giving with you know, with maybe giving a preliminary plan approval with the items that Mr. France noted, but ask you to come back and address those few things, and to see if there's anything else you could do with the building frontage or with the building architecture.
Okay.
I don't think it would have to be. I definitely don't want to shake your hands out. I'm excited as anybody. I don't try not to go too often because I don't understand it. But man, I love some Swansons, man. That's have you guys all had Swansons?
Familiar with
They're rock, I think. It was the first place I took, one of the first dates I took my wife to go down and get some peanut butter shakes a long time ago. But
It's like going back to 1959.
That's what it's supposed to look like. That's the problem.
But we used to park in the back, not next to the
I don't know, what do you guys have?
I have a comment. I can't believe with the stressing of the Western Reserve architecture that this has not been discussed with the mayor and the architect. And,
Well, I'd like to say that it was discussed, and the mayor and the planner and the architect actually approved that.
they have approved
Yes.
this concept.
Yes,
We've had extensive
Exactly.
conversations.
yes.
Now, we've got, you know, they've had no discussions with us about any of
That's the
that.
first I've heard of that.
Yeah, me too.
One of the things, if I may interject here for a second. The columns themselves, that's a minor thing. You can put some brick around that and get the same look, a nice, get some mass to them. The biggest problem I see is the roof. Okay, if you can solve that roof problem, I think everybody would be happy. There's a minor thing with colors, maybe with the band or whatever, but that's something that's not real important. But the roof, if there's some way that could be redesigned and still give you what you want as an overhang or whatever,
Yeah,
and still try to incorporate something that looks like a Western Reserve style.
sure.
I think that's the major item here, as far as I can see it.
The angled roof is the one non-negotiable trademark of the architecture that we won't give up. We'd rather withdraw the application.
Really? To make it look 50s, is that sort of the thinking? You want it to look 50s? Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I understand your position. And I think you understand our position as well.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
may I ask a question?
Sure, please.
Could you do it similar to your North Canton location? Because it seems like you have a roof pitch in your North Canton. You don't quite have that slant like that, but maybe you could incorporate it into the roof line of the main structure. Just, again, I'm just throwing it out there as an option, trying to find a compromise.
Yeah.
It sounds like the commission's
There's one in Canton that you looked at?
North Canton, yeah.
You've seen pictures?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
It doesn't
So
look
again,
like
I
it.
don't know if that's something that, I'm coming in just as, trying to maybe mediate and find a common ground. I don't know if that could be helpful.
Win-win here.
I understand.
Or is there things that you can, clearly, Western Reserve doesn't, back in whatever years, they didn't have drive-in places. It's gotta be a kind of a combination of that style with modern things that we're doing. There were not drive-throughs, there were not drive-ins, there was not, all these different things. There weren't stores like we have now, so, but could you do something more with the awning and the poles and maybe the window frames to put some of the decorative elements on that to try and, grab something off those lists that's in the code, to add to it, to try and capture some more of the Western Reserve.
What does your North Canton roof look like?
The North Canton building is, it has a canopy, but the canopy is actually flat. It's all around the building, it's a flat canopy. I don't know if you have it on your phone. It's a much more 1950s retro architecture than this.
Well, you said that that roof line, that slant roof line is non-negotiable, but how did they do it down in Canton to negotiate something different?
Well, the Canton restaurant was built about 15 years ago. It was a different ownership group. It was a different.
I get you.
At the time the ownership group wasn't thinking about leaving. We weren't thinking about leaving the Akron area.
That's the North Canton.
This is
This is just off my phone.
yeah, let me see that.
Just a
I
correct.
understand, things change with different, that wasn't a thing that was important at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me go back and talk to my team.
Kind of a 50s
I
look.
think our team, our CEO and our executive team is, when I go back tomorrow morning, they're gonna be shocked, because we thought we had already had this conversation. We thought this was done with the architectural consultant and the mayor. So we thought we were beyond this at this point. So I think tomorrow morning, my entry into the office will be a unique one.
I understand.
I'll go talk to them and see what they say.
I think Mr. Chavon came up with a couple good suggestions, and there's a few little things that you can do
Yep.
and still maintain a 50s look.
Yeah, well, as you alluded to, you're excited about it. Most people in this town are excited about it. And I think we're kind of losing sight of the fact that we are not an elected body. If you changed, any 5 of us would have a totally different opinion on what's going on here.
Good point.
And I understand that we're bound by this code, but it was also written in '95, so we are not a historic district, even though a lot of people think so, but 95 is not historic to me. And so, how long are we going to allow the dead end of the past to strangle out all the business that wants to come here just because we're trying to go to something that's so draconian and arcane that really needs to be updated?
Well, I've been on this board for 16 years, and I don't think we've strangled out anybody. There's been a business or two that maybe disagreed and wouldn't come because of the architecture, but we haven't really had a problem with businesses, being willing to do this. I don't know this is an outdated look. I don't know this is an outdated thing. I mean, Solon is doing the same style. I think Hudson has some, a form of it. I don't know, yes, it's 95, but it is still active in the code. It is the standards that we have. I mean, if it was changed to modern, contemporary something or other, we have to comply with that. I just don't think this does comply with it, whether I agree with the style or not. It's the hand we're dealt, right?
I totally understand, but I mean, it sounds like that we might actually be pushing something away here by being so to the letter rather than the intent.
But they're not, the intent is for a Western Reserve style, and that's not what we're getting.
Well, again, it's very subjective,
It
but,
is.
you know, the mayor as well as our architectural planner has, as far as we know, plus this, they've come to the table and compromised to at least get to the intent of this. I mean, the other Swansons are strikingly different than this. You know, I feel like the compromise is here. But again, it's completely arbitrary and subjective, and if you change the five of us, you'd have a completely different outcome.
I appreciate what you're saying, and I can understand it, and I understand what he's saying too. But I think the more important concept, I think, is to keep the architectural style similar, okay? Now, that's not to say that it has to be exactly that way, and there's some things you can't change. Maybe I think this is a matter of maybe a little bit of give and take somewhere, okay? But I think to just disregard the fact that we want to maintain the Western Reserve style, I don't think that's the approach we want to take. Because once we start doing that, then we get anybody coming in here, they would do with anything. It then has to be, yes, I mean, because it was well established years before that this is the way we want to go with this, okay? Now, obviously, we've made some concessions, and I think it was wise to do that. And I think in those cases, they were appropriate. And I think just a little bit of tweaking here, maybe a little bit more, what I want to say, without being accusative, a little bit more thought maybe put into that. If we could see, if we can put the Western Reserve style, some form of that back into this, I think we can have a good product there.
Some small details, instead of not massive overhaul of the plant, because I know you just can't, your building shape is what it is. Some things that you want to keep in there as a style, you want to keep in there. Is there some small details that could be added that could, you know, make me feel comfortable that yes, they made a pretty strong attempt without throwing out, you know, the whole plan that they had and starting over. I don't want you to do that. I don't want this to turn into doubling the cost of your exterior. I would like to see it get a little closer. You know, if here's where you're at, here's the ideal building, just somewhere in that middle range is what I think.
Yeah, that North Canton thing looked kind of good to us, that picture that he showed us. I know it's obsolete, but maybe that's a 50s building, I don't know.
About 50s on the picture.
Yeah, it's a 50s.
Let me go back to my management team and give them the feedback.
So, I mean, I think, like, at least I would like to get something that I think there's some, you know, at least a preliminary approval and, you know, some contingencies, and then have you come back. I don't know, is that in appropriate with what we're asking for?
No, I mean, I don't think so. You certainly, the site is pretty close to being designed. You just have the parking issue, which you're going to seek a variance. So it's really going to come down to the architectural piece. They have to come back for a final plan approval anyhow. So I think showing that good, you know, good faith effort, the commission provides a preliminary plan approval, gets you that next step, and you could take a look with your management team on that architectural element and can incorporate it coming back for a final plan, or maybe even having the chairman or at a meeting with the mayor and the architect to talk it through as well. Just suggestion.
So we'd approve this preliminary approval subject to getting the variances, I guess.
Yeah.
The several variances, and reviewing the architectural.
Yeah, along with, the couple other things that are in number 4 that Brian listed.
Updated site plan.
I mean, I don't know if you want to take it, or you want me to, or you?
I want to make a comment.
Make a comment first.
Okay, I'm not an architect, but I understand, similar to what we've done in the past, if a business comes in and their sign is a national national sign and it doesn't have to meet our requirements. There's the variances that are given, we go along with that. But this is similar. This concept is a 50s design. That's their brand. And maybe, what Mr. Chavon said, maybe there's a few things you can do that'll make us feel better, but you don't want to give away the 50s design. That's the uniqueness of this proposal, I think, and we have to look at it that way. That's all.
Okay. Well, I'd like to make a motion for preliminary site plan approval, subject to the applicant obtaining a variance from the BZA to maintain 9 by 18 parking spaces on the sides of the building. Obtaining a variance from the BZA to permit more than one sign per building elevation. Obtain variance from the BZA to permit additional signage as proposed, and for the applicant to come back with an updated site plan to address the landscaping, lighting, the performance standards are noted, and architecture. Just think I missed anything?
No.
Second.
Okay, yeah, I think that's it.
Any more discussion?
Yes. On a lighter note,
Yeah,
I noticed your signage.
yes,
Okay, you have all your products listed on there?
yeah, on the menu board.
Pardon me?
The
Yeah,
menu,
I
the
mean,
menu.
yes, right, yeah, right. All your products are listed there, but there's no prices to them. How do you know the prices?
Well, the challenge with putting a permanent sign on the building and adding prices is you can't change the prices without changing the actual sign. It's a painted on sign. So we actually give you, when we come to your car, we give you a menu that you can.
That's what I was getting at, okay.
We give it to you in your car.
Take it care.
The one in your car has the prices on it.
Okay, so
The menu items don't change on the board, but the prices change from time to time due to tariffs and things like that.
Yeah, and since you mentioned that, I just happened to notice. What was the reason for the shift in the sidewalk? Do you know, down here?
I honestly don't know why.
I was just curious, there must be something, because I think it goes straight right down, but there's.
Yeah, I'll find out. There's something right there. I don't know what that.
I think it's a traffic box of some sort, but.
I'll find out.
Like,
anyway.
yeah, okay, doesn't matter. Any more discussion, motion, anything else? All right, why don't we do a roll call for, oh, do you have something else?
The entrance, where the light is, the traffic light is, that's gonna be revised, right? That's gonna be wider?
Yes, we'll make that wider.
Okay.
This can be full in and out, right, because we have a traffic light there.
Okay.
Do roll call.
Mr. Westbrooks,
Yes.
Mr. Chivon,
Yes.
Mr. Cox,
Yes.
Mr. Valada,
Yes.
Mr. Finley,
Yes.
All right. I'll get in contact with administration and talk to them a little bit about it too, but maybe getting some else I have to try and help it.
Very good.
Mr.
Appreciate the
Westbrooks.
feedback. Thank you so much. Appreciate your time.
Kevin, do you want to address the signage separately, or
Pardon?
you just including it, or?
Oh.
But preliminary site plan, do we not necessarily?
Typically, typically you do the signs as a separate action, separate application, but it's combined. It'd probably be safe to, but you include it in your motion. I don't think it's gonna, I think it's probably fine.
I wrote it in there.
Yeah.
Just making sure. I wrote it in there.
So I think, yeah, it's basically. Okay,
Good.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Sure,
much.
sure.
Have a great night, everyone.
Just one.
We're just signing one, that's for both.
We have spectators, huh? For some reason.
Process for
Really?
You need to do it.
We have a director of marketing.
Yeah, we had a good time.
Yeah.
I think you made a good point there.
Yeah, so.
It's gotta be a 50-looking thing, doesn't it? That's the point. I know.
Just to, because I haven't answered that
So
question.
we'll just email in the link.
Sure, yeah.
I think we're okay. We can talk about it.
I don't know. Maybe you can do that, can't
Non-conforming.
I doubt they would.
We do need to rush on that color issue.
Just email me in the morning, or reply to you.
And then
I don't know
if
if
you
the
want,
restaurants are. Culver's doing.
talk to me about amendment.
Windows up there like speedway and wasted peak stuff.
Yeah, I don't know.
That's so stupid.
One more thing before we leave, so, council,
Thank you. Have a
you
great
stayed
night.
for the council meeting the other night.
Yes, indeed.
Yes.
Brian, Dave and I were all at the last council meeting, and they took our sign amendment. Brian explained a bunch of stuff, and take the council, but Dave brought a couple things that you've seen since we approved it. I think Brian looked at it a little bit, but you basically had two issues that you brought forward in that meeting.
Right, separately, they're fine. Together, it's kind of a problem. So we limited the colors to primary and complementary, and we've kind of excluded white, black, and gray. Collectively, we can change, but as it stands now, we've eliminated those, and most of the signs have those colors on them. And so that in tandem with the fact that now the grandfather clause on non-conforming signs is gone. If they change a nameplate or change anything on that sign, they have to update the entire thing. So those taken together, we have an issue. If they were just separate, I don't think we have an issue.
Huh.
I think Brian had some thoughts on the change your name part.
Yeah, the color is more your choice if you want to expand beyond the primary and complementary. I think a couple of my reports in the last, I don't know, 3 or 4 months, I noted that we had some signage that came in black and gray, and that wasn't conforming to the modification that we were proposing. So it's really a question if the commission wants to open that up to include, the white, gray, black. Definitely the gray and
suggest?
black. I think white is the absence of color. But, so I think that's more of a question. You guys do want to do that, then that's an easy change. The non-conforming issue, I think we're okay. So the section that you're referring to that's eliminated, let me just pull it up, 117915, this is the new numbering, 117915.
It's okay.
Yeah, it's K3. Yep, K3, and that reads, currently, a non-conforming sign shall not be altered, modified, or reconstructed other than to comply with this chapter except, and it gives 3 reasons, when the existing use has new ownership, which results in a change of name of the use or the business on the property. And I think that's your
That's the exemption.
primary concern.
Right.
So name changes, you'd have to bring that sign up the code. And so that's a content-based regulation. And so when we went through, and there's a lot to remember when we went through all this, I called that out, that's a content-based, we need to eliminate that. The maintenance section under what's now J gives the ability, so if it's just a name change and doesn't enlarge the sign in any way, so if it's the same exact footprint, it's just changing the name, under the maintenance section of a non-conforming sign, they can switch that out.
So we've moved the grandfather clause to the maintenance section.
So
In essence.
in essence, yes. We took out the content piece, which we need to avoid having to read the sign from a content standpoint. We took that out and we rely on the maintenance section. So again, if somebody were to want to have a name change, as long as they don't increase the size of their sign, they're fine. They can put that name change in, no problem. It's just a maintenance issue. If that, let's say they want to switch out the font type or something, no issue whatsoever. It's considered maintenance. Let's say it's peeling or the letters are cracking, again, no problem. Under maintenance, you can change that. It's when you increase it.
Right.
If you're going to increase it, then it kicks in the elimination of the nonconformity.
Okay.
So, in the example you gave about the nameplate, we're good with the maintenance
Okay.
under the code as it's written.
All right. I mean, that's fine. I'm just not sure that it's, I mean, it's clear to us, but I don't know if it's gonna be clear to other folks, because it was very clear when it was K in those exceptions.
Yeah, so that,
But I get that we need to get it out of there because of the preamble that we have now.
yeah.
But I don't, you know, it just, I can see why it would get kicked to maintenance. I don't know if we can make that more clear, or how.
Yeah,
we can make that.
I could talk to Mark about that. So I'll say in general, and I say this a little tongue in cheek, these codes are never written so
No.
the layperson can understand them. I mean, sometimes we struggle with understanding some of the language, and then when attorneys get their hands on it, sorry, Mark, but it makes it worse.
Right.
I feel very comfortable that if somebody were to come in with that section eliminated as proposed, if somebody were to come in and want a name change, no problem whatsoever, as long as they don't increase that nonconformity. Once that happens, though, it does eliminate their nonconformity and they have to bring the sign into the current standard. So the case of like, let's say it's a strip plaza and one tenant leaves, there's gonna be no problem putting another one up there so long as they don't increase that size of that sign.
Sure, and that was my main concern.
Yeah, and generally they don't, because it's already built in an existing footprint. They only have so much area to put on that nameplate.
Yep.
So they'll be okay.
Okay.
Yep. Then that question of the color though, that's really your issue. I mean, I have no, that's what we're gonna do, no problem. But I think I made the comment that night, at that point, we'll have gray and black included. I'd argue white's already included, but we could be clear. If gray and black were included, then the question I have, we have to have a standard. Somewhere there has to be a standard. We kind of talked about this all throughout this discussion, because if we were to just subjectively make a determination, like kind of how the Commons is now, we say it's open to whatever color they could choose, the tenant can choose their color, but then we have to approve it. Well, what's our standard? We need a standard, and that's how this all sort of started out. If we're gonna continue color regulation, which I think we can, under our circuit, our Court of Appeals, that we fall under, they're very, it's very supportive of regulating colors as a means of aesthetics. Maybe not some of the other national court cases, but ours is not ruled that stringently. And so I think we can regulate colors. I just get a little nervous if we open it up to all those, then the next one that comes in, let's say Charming Charlie, with a tertiary color that's a mixture of primary and complementary colors, how do we say no to them? That's where I get a little concerned. And we probably, I mean, again, we can leave it as is. I just, maybe at that point you don't have color regulation, but I know that's not what we want to do, so.
If we did want to add black, white, gray, I know we've kind of endorsed the one written document and sent it to council.
Yeah.
If we wanted to, what would be, this is an informal recommendation for them to consider when they do,
You could take a motion tonight Mr. Finley, if you wanted to make a motion, supported, approved, majority approves it, you can send that to council. They're moving forward. Council's having their public hearing, I think the 8th or something of January. Yeah, whatever that first Thursday. They're moving forward with the amendment. I don't think this is one such that, and we don't have a public hearing at this level anyhow. So just simply talking about it now, if you want to think about it more, we can talk at the December meeting. If you want to amend it now, no problem. I really, it's not that critical of an issue that if we want to add the black and the gray and be clear and add white, no problem. I think we could do that right now.
It's up to you.
I have a motion to include the colors white, black, and gray in the sign code update that's been sent to council.
What colors do we have already before we?
Red, yellow, blue,
And so we're gonna
orange,
add,
green, and purple.
All the primary colors.
All the primary and complementary colors. I'm just adding the neutrals.
I'll second it.
I like that idea.
So any more thoughts?
Well, I just know that even the Supreme Court cases, they all think aesthetics are important. I mean, they say that over and over, so I don't know if that kind of nullifies any aesthetics we have. We can have any color you want, I guess that's what we're saying. That'd be the alternate argument. I'm not real strong either way on this, but aesthetics have something to do with.
It's so subjective.
Yeah.
It is. I think, again, the only thing you have to hesitate on, so we need a standard, right? We have to have a
Yeah.
standard to go by. This will just increase that standard. That's fine. I think that where we have to be careful is if somebody comes in and they have a, quote, trademark logo that doesn't meet this standard, we can't say, I mean, I suppose you could, but you can't really say, well, it's trademarked, so we will allow it. We have to have a standard. And if it doesn't meet the standard, and I keep coming back to that Charming Charlie one, because I think that was like some sort of pinkish or something, or some,
Yeah, I mean, Maurice's currently is like a teal,
yeah,
so.
right.
Which wouldn't.
Which wouldn't technically meet the standard, but that's probably a trademark logo. So we have to have a standard is all. I just keep driving that. And if the standard is to include black, gray, and white, that's fine. We have the standard and we can use that as our basis for making decisions. It's the other piece, it's the ones that don't meet that standard, regardless of their trademark. This is our standard and this is what we're falling back to. We regulate color as a means of controlling community aesthetics. And here's what we allow.
Okay, so any more discussion on that? All right, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
So that would, I don't know how we relay that if it gets.
So it'll be relayed, Susan takes the official minutes, so I'll let Mark Cadetti know, but maybe you could pass along to the council clerk the motion. Now, they will likely, my feeling is they'll likely question, why was it a 4-1 vote? So just so you're aware, and Mr. Finley, you may be there and I'll be there and we can relay that. I'm sure, Mr. Cox?
No, I probably won't be there.
Okay, yeah. I can probably
I'm
comfortably.
outvoted, yeah.
I'll comfortably state
Doesn't
you
matter.
recognize you
It's
were
irrelevant.
4-1. Yeah.
They did mention, what was the date, January 9th of the public hearing on it? They had suggested, I know they definitely want Brian there. Dave'll probably be there just because he's now roped himself into everything because he's interested in this stuff. I'll probably go because I feel guilty. They said, oh, you should have a whole planning commission should be there. Now, I don't know what purpose. Honestly, if Brian can't answer, we're probably.
No,
screwed.
Brian can
But-
answer, yeah.
But between Brian and David, if you guys are welcome to come. They asked you to come, but
Right.
don't feel like you gotta come
No.
to that. And I'll remind everybody in next month's meeting with the datas again, but, between 2 or 3
The
people.
public hearing is gonna generate a lot of, I don't think anyone will be there.
I
Sign
doubt
code.
anyone will be.
Yeah.
My gut feeling is nobody. And I think it's okay
It's
if,
generated here.
Well, we would.
I have
5
trouble
times the number
understanding.
of people if 5 showed up.
if you all show up, that's fine. And so long as you don't deliberate decisions, it's acceptable for you all to be there. You're a member of the public as well as a member of the commission. You can provide your individual opinion if you chose to. It would be if you were to start to deliberate any decisions or collectively discuss things, then I would call it a special meeting of the planning commission and advertise it as such. So that's up to you guys. I'd just err on the side of caution.
Nobody, these guys don't want to go. And, so I'm like,
And then Mr. Finley had asked me also how to go about maybe amending other sections of the code, and I don't know specifically if there was another one, but the code, I've stated the code is outdated. And so, and I've sort of mentioned that through a few mayors, and planning commission members, and I know, Kevin, you've heard me say it a few times, that's entirely up to you guys. The code can be amended in one of 3 ways. I feel like there should be a drum roll. Let's see, so in 1141 of the code is your amendment procedure, and it can be done in one of 3 ways. The planning commission can request the amendment, council can request the amendment by introduction of an ordinance, or filing of an application by one or more property owners in the area that's affected by the amendment. Typically, that means that refers to rezoning as opposed to an amendment to the text language, but I do think property owners have standing to request change to the text as well, and not just the map. So those are 3 ways. So if the commission wanted to take on different pieces and parts, they certainly could do that. I know Mayor Miglerini had me work on the Board of Zoning Appeals chapter, and then ultimately the commission adopted that, recommended that, and got adopted by council. That was an absolute must that we had to do. It was just, you know, there's court cases that were really, that we were not, you know, that we were not in line with in our code. So there's a number of issues with the code as it relates to just simple readability, you know, just ease of read and flow. Those are one thing. There's a number of redundancies and conflicts throughout the code, and then there's just old standards.
Yeah.
You know, our landscape. Right, yeah, and our landscaping, we don't really have necessarily lighting standards. The commission has historically sort of quite frankly, taken some guidance from me and used the 1-foot candle at non-residential, half-foot candle at residential property lines, which is a very good standard to follow. We don't technically have it in the code, but it'd be good to sort of put some standards in place for lighting. You know, you don't want to make your code overly burdensome, but you want to be able to protect what the community wants in terms of, you know, community aesthetics and standards. So I think that there's a lot of room to amend the code.
I can give you a typical example. We had a case where a lady wanted to install a 200 square feet shed on her property. So you're allowed 140, no matter what size yard you have. So if you have a big tractor here, you just have no room to put it in. So she went to the Board of Zoning Appeals, because, you know, that was the procedure. The Board of Zoning Appeals denied it. But, and the code says you can put 2 sheds, one next to each other, each 140 square feet. So if you put 2 sheds, one next to each other, and they're both 100 square feet, you're okay. But you can't put one that's 200 square feet.
Yeah, no, that's one that we've
So I mean, this is just one example of what we really run into. You know, honestly, your point is well taken. That should be revisited and updated throughout.
So anything in the green book's fair game then? For us, anyway?
Green book.
Our green code book.
Oh, yeah, if it's just, your purview is the planning and zoning code, which includes your subdivision regulations.
Okay.
If I had to, you know, pick off which one, I would certainly go to the planning and zoning code first. I think your subregs should be updated as well. They're very outdated. You know, we're not getting a lot of subdivisions, right? We're pretty fairly built out. It's more redevelopment. So I would say you need to focus on your planning and zoning code. Nino, that's a great example. I mean, I think to have a conditional zoning certificate for a garage, that's overly excessive and burdensome to a property owner, I believe, to go through that process. I would like to see that. I mean, you guys have seen my code, it's been falling apart. I have tons of notes in here of things that I think we should change. That'd be one of them. Like we straight say you can only have 2 accessory structures, no matter how big your lot. We have some big lots in town, and you know, maybe they should be allowed to have 3, and you cap it based on a percentage of lot coverage as opposed to just saying, you gotta have this and this is your hard line, and, or you gotta go get a variance. So there's lots of different ways to look at accessory buildings, and the code has been put Band-Aids on it for a long time.
Yeah.
Now, I'll warn you, just so you know, obviously I did sign code with you guys, and it's a time consuming, that's a big piece, and we'd be able to plot that into a new code because it's updated, same with the BZA section. Macedonia is a very complex city. You have lots of things on the map, you have lots of things that are supposed to be on the map that are done differently. And so it would take a lot of horses to update your code if you were to do it all at once, which is what I highly recommend. And in that case, it probably would not be me doing that because I just don't have the time capacity to do it. You have to hire a consultant. And I'll just give you an idea, on a code like this for a consulting firm to do it, you're probably at about $80,000 to $100,000.
Really?
To update this.
Wow.
Oh yeah, it's not cheap. I was a consultant with a consulting company, and I can tell you what this would have been bid out at when I left there in 2008. This would have been easily an $80,000 code update. It's you guys are a very complex community with the number of zoning districts and non-residential that you have and the intricacies, and the fact that it hasn't been updated and comprehensive update in
Some of it's old, 1962.
30 plus years, yeah. I really think that's where you'd be sitting.
You're not gonna make it, you're not gonna make it 100,000. The good thing is there may be some programs from the county or the state that, you know, they may take advantage of.
I'm not aware of any.
Yeah.
It's straight general fund money, unfortunately.
Mayfield Heights got a little bit of money too, when they got that upgraded a while back, so I don't know, if this fund is still available or something.
Yeah,
It's
maybe
worth
there's
getting
some,
together.
something with CDBG or something that you
Yeah.
might be able to get, yeah.
We done?
Anyway, before you go, I got some too. I got a call from Margaretti today, and I know that the Northwood developer is withdrew again from today. We had a meeting on site last Monday. Our attorney, Mark, was there, their attorney was there, the developer was there, and I just happened to be there. So they're trying to work out some kind of solution where, you know, they will do some for the community, some for the development there, and, you know, they would be able to keep those lights. I got a proposal from Brett Modick that it was brought to me and for our review, and if everybody is on board with this, we may move forward and probably put this to rest, but they still have to come to this board here for their approval that those light fixtures have been changed and the new ones will be approved. I'd just like to add that they have kind of roused all the residents there because they're all thinking down now that, you know, if they keep those lights, they don't have to pay anything. But if they put the lights that the city is referring to, they would have to pay for their own maintenance. They're partly right. They don't know that right now they're paying about $330 a month for the light fixtures that they have now. And they're paying according to the usage and a percentage for a repair replacement in the future. If they change to our lights, I think their amount will go away, but they would have to put a meter there, and they would have to pay, you know, according to the usage, and so it's probably a wash. But again, they're telling all the residents there that if they are going to be forced to change those lights, that they would have to do all the maintenance at their own cost and the replacement at their own costs. But I think that the law director is kind of leaning towards accepting this proposal.
What's, I'm gonna read it, but not.
So what they're gonna do, they're gonna add some lights and the posts in the front, which I think they were supposed to do from the beginning anyway. Although we don't have really much documents that says that. So they're gonna put 6 light poles on there, illuminated. They're going to put some landscaping in the front, added landscaping. They're gonna put some nice street signs, and they are. I remember when I started here, we had some complaints when those houses started going up from the residents on the street on the west, because they would see the house. They had, you know, nice wooded area behind, and all of a sudden they see houses. They were all complaining they would see the houses. But they put a mound, but they can still see over the mound. So now they agreed to put a substantial number of trees, evergreens there to, you know, to hide their view. So at least those residents are gonna be happy. But, you know, the trees that they proposed there, I think some of them are crab apples, and you know, we don't like those. If you know, we have to get an arborist to figure out what kind of trees we're going to put in there.
Why did they put those cheap lights in anyway when they agreed not to in paper, in writing?
Well, I think what happened is that you know, they hired Ohio Edison to put those lights on. And
They what?
That they hired Ohio Edison to put those lights on. They didn't put it on.
Well, didn't they look and see what kind of lights they were going to put in there? Some of them are falling over,
They
I
should have
noticed.
seen that, of course.
They're already falling over.
Yeah, well.
But how can we allow that to stay there like that?
Well, you already have them in 2 other places in the city, so this is not the first time that you.
But
you
I
guys
don't know what the agreement was with the 2 other places in the city. I saw it in writing.
Well, you know, I'm
In
not
fact, you
trying to
agreed-
make up your
you-
mind.
you-
do what
you told
want.
us
I'm
that we
just
shouldn't.
I'm just giving you an update here. You make up your own mind as to what you want to do, but this
I
is
just
not
find it
gonna
so
end.
odd.
Well, if we can put this thing to bed, and you got the law director involved, but it just seemed to me that they've been laughing at us all year. They're putting up more poles, more
What their the
lights.
contention is,
They're building more homes, and they keep
Yeah.
saying they're waiting for some letter or some data they asked for in April.
so they're gonna say, well, you know, what kind of business really is the city? I mean, we have to maintain it, we have to replace it, and, you know, the city's not involved in that at all. It's just that, you know, we live in the area, we want those lights, and if you allow them to keep those lights, they're willing to do like $50,000-$60,000 worth of improvement, landscaping and stuff on there. Again, it's not set up yet, it's just a proposal, just, you know, I don't even know if I was supposed to give them to you, but I got it and I give them to you, and the law director's working on it.
I understand. But if we could put this thing to bed, to me, it's ridiculous to keep withdrawing every month off the agenda. I mean,
If you have no idea what they put the city through, what those girls, cities, they have to, the records that they had to dig out, I mean, the requests that they made, I mean, it's just ungodly. It was a
well, if
tremendous.
our law director is not going, there must be something that's stopping us. So, kind of like what Mr. Cox was saying.
Yeah.
Something isn't making sense.
No.
So, let's put it to bed.
Yeah, I would just like to, get it settled.
Just get it settled.
Something settled, get it,
Okay.
you know, in this, I mean, yeah, it leaves them with the lights we don't want, but the improvements that would be making would be more for the general public. That, you know, it's along
I
the
agree.
road we see, I don't
Okay.
see those lights, I don't drive up there. It's just crazy to keep kicking it down the road and never doing anything.
Okay. All right.
Who has to maintain those lights?
I'm sorry?
Who has to maintain the lights if the
They
lights
do.
fall down?
Ohio Edison.
I mean, if they start
they
falling
fall
down,
over,
Ohio
isn't
Edison,
that
they
a
can
city
maintain it.
light?
The city has no
Oh, really?
rights in there whatsoever.
They're leaning now.
Yeah, they are, yeah.
Oh, I thought we'd have to because it was.
No,
I think I
no,
heard
no,
that from the
no.
old mayor,
No,
that it's
no,
gonna be our
no,
problem.
No,
No.
it's their problem. We got it in writing.
All right.
We have
Well, I
nothing to do with that.
misunderstood.
Motion to adjourn?
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Oh,
No, it's really not.
Aye.
Before everybody takes off, who has the plan?